What about you, sir? Do you think the colored students will show up?
If I got anything to do with it, they won't show up. Well, I think it's a breaking point of the school integration. I just don't feel that they have a right to go to school.
We shouldn't understand racism solely as these individual acts of bigotry, because it takes away from how racism operates systemically.
Are the 911 tapes giving us a horrifying insight into the exact moment when this teenage boy who was carrying nothing but soda and Skittles.
So if we look at the recent Trayvon Martin case, it's not so much that George Zimmerman ran up to Trayvon Martin and shot him twice in the chest. The more important piece is that a system actually looked at the legal structure and said, we can't even arrest this person based on a particular legislation of the state, and giving Zimmerman the benefit of the doubt that he acted in self-defense, despite someone being unarmed and actually just having a bottle of tea and some Skittles, right? So again, I think that, so we can locate that. If we look at that in two ways, we can locate that in an act as an individual act, but I want us to pay attention to how the system responded to that individual act so we can have a deeper understanding of racism.
But racism is more of a systemic, institutional thing where there's not only individual actions, but systemic decisions that are being made that are impacting a whole group of people because of their race.
First and foremost, through institutions and systemic values that are pushed by these institutions.
A system that systemically disadvantages particular groups based on color, class, and position in society.
It's the systematic oppression of, of one people by another.
Treating someone inferior, or it's a belief of inferiority predicated on a person's race.
Racism is taught in schools because it's still taught in society.
Racism is really embedded in, in the history of American education.
Race has always played a part in education in the United States.
In the mid-1800s, and black children were denied access to the same schools that, that white children were able to attend.
Schools have always been sorting machines. And what I mean by sorting machines is it's always separated particular groups, whether it be by race, class, gender, but certain groups to rule and other groups to obey.
To the advantage usually of white Americans and to the disadvantage of people of color.
So when we're thinking about when the achievement gap starts to widen, what you're talking about is not necessarily the potential being limited. You're talking about the opportunities or the access to opportunities being limited.
I think it's important when we talk about racism to not think about it just as the act of an individual, but to think about how it operates in systems.
If we're saying we're going to provide an equal education and an equal opportunity to all kids, which we still say, but we don't do it. And we don't really believe that we're doing it. It's a lot of it is lip service. We say these things because they sound good. I mean, it goes along with the whole American ideal, fairness and equality. But how are you going to put your money where your mouth is?
So given the opportunity, people will be able to then meet the goals. But if they're not given the opportunity or the support to grow into that opportunity, then no.
I think white privilege is part of America, but I think it goes beyond America too.
It's obvious that white privilege is a critical part of, of the American education system.
The U.S. educational system will justify it. And what I mean by that is if you have a larger system that systemically disadvantages particular groups based on what they look like and where they live and who they are, then a school will be reflective of that.
When you think about schools that have populations of African Americans and Latinos as the predominant population, and you compare it against schools that have a predominantly white population, there's a stark contrast in resources, there's a stark contrast in expectations, in quality of instruction, as well as support from outside entities.
White privilege in a lot of ways is invisible. You don't realize that you're getting privilege, that you're advantaged until you really start becoming more aware of it and thinking more critically about it.
Based on how this person looks and where this person is from, they have a better chance of succeeding long term than someone who may look like myself and come from the areas that I come from.
In a city like Chicago, communities compete for resources, and it's hard sometimes in poor neighborhoods that don't have a lot of economic clout, because there may not be, businesses may have left the area, there may not be a lot to draw the attention of politicians to the area besides the alderperson. It can be hard to get resources for schools.
The whole educational system, from centuries back has been constructed to protect the privileges that white people have in the society. So it's definitely a part of the education system.
The problem with white privilege, I think, is the biggest problem with it is that it's not acknowledged by a lot of white people. And a lot of white people feel like whatever they've gotten is because they've worked hard for it, and if you want to get it too, well, work harder, because I worked hard for mine, you work hard for yours.
U.S. educational system.
Education
And education
Education
is the key to moving beyond racism.
I think it's important when we talk about racism to not think about it just as the act of an individual.
It's one that we have to keep pushing against. We have no choice.
But to think about how it operates in systems. I think that's really important as we start to untangle the definition of racism.
Because otherwise, we're creating two societies that are going in different directions.
Really a world I don't want to live in. I mean, I think we can do better than that, but I do think it takes intentionality.
drive,
Personal success.
perseverance,
Succeeding,
and resilience.
Power.
where do we begin? So how do we begin to address this?
And they'll find a way if given the opportunity.
But I think we need to carefully revisit how we train teachers. I think right now we have too much regulation in terms of all the things that teachers are required to do that have nothing to do with learning. But what would it mean for a teacher to actually have very intimate knowledge of political economy, of cognitive psychology, of organizing, of relationship building? What if those were foundations of a teacher educational program?
I think we have a lot of work to do as a country, and the disparity piece is it's incredibly disheartening, because we lose a lot of potential. I always tell my kids, I said, come on, I need you in school. That cure to cancer can be right there in that brain. I believe it's there. I believe we have potential leaders in all of the kids at my school. I just think it's our role to bring that out.